The rise of Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker has been a fascinating one. The guy is, undoubtedly, one of a very few number of directors who have the clout to make pretty much whatever they want at a time when Steven Spielberg has trouble gathering financing for his projects. The combination of Christopher Nolan's unfailing box office success and high critical praise makes him a low-risk prospect for any major studio, even if you're greenlighting a budget of say $165 million for an original sci-fi epic. It feels prudent to look back on his filmography as a whole. In what format, you ask? Well, by ranking each and every film from worst to best. Of course, behold, Christopher Nolan movies ranked. Hello all, welcome to True Cinema. In today's video we'll discuss about Nolan's top 11 movies. Number 11, following with shocking plot twists and austere characters. Christopher Nolan's directorial debut is certainly an interesting preview of what came later, but it's easily his weakest film thus far. Made with a tight budget, this $6,000 feature saw Nolan judicially using natural light and black and white 16mm film stock in order to keep production costs down. These constraints actually benefit the film's noir vibes, and while Following is an impressive achievement, it isn't really comparable to his more ambitious later work. In Following, an unnamed writer, Jeremy Theobald, stalks strangers in the London underworld, hoping to find artistic inspiration in the lurid setting. After an encounter with the ruthless burglar cop, Alex Hoff, the writer decides to follow the serial criminal and becomes an accomplice to his robberies. The issue with Following isn't the budget, but the characters. Theobald lacks unique characteristics, and Nolan's impressive heist sequences aren't impactful due to the lack of an emotional connection. Still, Nolan's nasty, hopeless depiction of the London underground is interesting in contrast to the polish of his later films, and the 70-minute runtime leaves little room for bloat. While Following shows the potential of a promising young filmmaker on the rise, it lacks the deeper philosophical underpinnings and rich characters of Nolan's later work. Number 10, Batman Begins. It's hard to overestimate how radically Christopher Nolan changed the public perception of the superhero genre. While the Spider-Man and X-Men franchises were still strong, Batman himself had been a laughingstock ever since the embarrassment of Batman and Robin, and failures like Hulk and Daredevil failed to capture audiences' imaginations. Then came Batman Begins, which proved that comic book films could be realistic, dramatic stories focused on characters, not bloated world-building. This origin story establishes the tragic events that spur Bruce Wayne into action, explains his fear of bats and how that led to his superhero identity, and shows how training with the League of Shadows physically prepared him for his mission while also inspiring his theatricality. Making the League of Shadows the film's antagonist bridges the gap between Batman's early history and his first mission, showing off Wayne's growth as he faces off against his former mentor, Ra's al Ghul, Liam Neeson. Despite the darkness, Batman Begins is an earnest film that dedicates time to conversations about responsibility. It's the rare Nolan film that lacks spectacles, and the murky final act is far less interesting than the more intimate dialogue-driven scenes. Nolan would get better at directing action while making The Dark Knight, a film he was clearly already thinking about while making Batman Begins. The closing shot, which teases the Joker, is one hell of a cliffhanger. Number 9, Insomnia. While Insomnia is the only film of Nolan's career that he didn't also write, the neo-noir crime thriller doesn't lack his signature twisty storytelling. A remake of a 1997 Norwegian film, this investigative mystery follows an aging detective, Al Pacino, who must face up to the choices he's made during his career. It's one of Pacino's last great performances, and Nolan does a terrific job at deconstructing the character by questioning whether working outside the law is ever justified. Pacino's character, Will Dormer, claims he's only broken procedure when his suspicions are beyond reproach, and Nolan brilliantly emphasizes Dormer's anxieties through an internal affairs investigation that runs parallel to the main whodunit. While more straightforward than Nolan's later films, Insomnia is also one of his scariest. Dormer is a stranger within a small Alaskan community heartbroken by the murder of a teenage girl, and the LAPD detective is agonized by the coldness of the environment and local residents' reluctance to share details with an outsider. There's a foreboding anxiety that builds to the reveal of antagonist Walter Finch, Robin Williams, a villain who unnerves Dormer with his open admissions of guilt. Accountability and guilt faced by a career lawman are not unique themes to Insomnia, but Nolan explores them in a compelling, singular way. It's not a particularly rewatchable film given how cleanly the story wraps up, but it's a fascinating outlier within Nolan's filmography. Its low ranking is more a reflection of how solid Nolan's filmography is than a knock against Insomnia itself. Number 8. The Prestige. The Prestige, Nolan's first period film, examines the nature of artistry and the excitement surrounding emerging technology through a rivalry between two magicians, Alfred Borden, Christian Bale, and Robert Angier, Hugh Jackman. Their battle of wits makes the 19th century feel refreshingly modern. Of course, the real magician here is Nolan himself, who relies on narrative misdirection and uses a clever framing device. The film opens with Michael Caine explaining how magicians pull off their tricks, to deliver exposition and dance around some of the plot holes. The Prestige has science fiction elements, but they're introduced gradually, and the reveal of David Bowie as Nikola Tesla is one of the coolest cameos in recent memory. However, the cross-cutting between timelines and dueling perspectives grow grating as Nolan willfully withholds knowledge in order to preserve his big reveals. Bale and Jackman keep the story engaging, but convoluted plot twists make it hard to fully invest in either character. While lavishly designed, The Prestige lacks the emotional center of Nolan's strongest work. Number 7. The Dark Knight Rises. Given the number of superhero films that have come out since its release, The Dark Knight Rises has aged remarkably well, as it's a rare comic book film that explores consequences. There's a sense of finality that comes with concluding Nolan's Batman trilogy, and the scale of The Dark Knight Rises makes it stand apart from the intimate character study of Batman Begins and the sprawling crime saga of The Dark Knight. Bane's Tom Hardy assault on Gotham is grandiose, but it doesn't stretch the believability that Nolan worked so hard to establish in the previous two films. The 8-year gap between the death of Harvey Dent, Aaron Eckhart, and The Dark Knight Rises leaves Bruce Wayne, Christian Bale, broken, and it's interesting seeing the billionaire return to save a city that openly rejected him. It's the most emotional movie in the trilogy, particularly the heartbreaking conversations. However, the logic of The Dark Knight Rises doesn't always hold up. Bane's scheme for overthrowing Gotham City is convoluted, and the awkward last-minute reveal of Talia al Ghul, Marion Cotillard, drags, especially given the nearly 3-hour runtime. And yet, Nolan still manages to end on a high note, passing the Batman mantle to John Blake, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, in a beautiful final sequence that kicks the Hans Zimmer score into high gear. Number 6. Tenet. Tenet takes time to understand, and not just because of the intricate nature of the film's central conceit, time inversion. The tone can be off-putting. This is the closest thing to a James Bond movie that Nolan has ever made, but he trades 07's charismatic romanticism for a world of serious professionals who only communicate through their shared interest in work. While it may initially feel like Nolan is closing off his characters from emotion, nuanced performances by John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, and Elizabeth Debicki suggest that the characters are isolated by their inability to live normal lives when the fate of the globe is at stake. While only dedicated Nolan obsessives may be able to keep up with the rapid-fire expositional dialogue, the goals of each set-piece are always understandable. In Tenet, Nolan crafts some of his most impressive action yet, with precisely orchestrated sequences such as the Oslo Freeport heist and the opening opera escape made even more complicated through the intersection of past and future timelines. Tenet overloads the viewer with information to the point that it's easy to miss key details. The traumatic environmental event that motivates antagonist Andre Sator, Kenneth Branagh, is barely touched upon, in contrast to the laborious attention paid to explaining time inversion. The relentless pacing doesn't leave any room for boredom, but the critical attention that each scene requires can be exhausting. Number 5. Memento. Following may be Nolan's debut, but Memento is the film that introduced him and his style to a broad audience. With Memento, Nolan is clearly interested in puzzling his viewers, but it's not a mystery that favors complexity over human emotion. Memento hooks viewers with its clever structure, but the story itself makes them care, rendering the film's later revelations even more gripping. Guy Pearce's protagonist, Leonard Shelby, is a man who cannot form new memories, and ends up being one of Nolan's strongest characters. Memento may use that dead wife cliché Nolan's often accused of employing, but Shelby's search for the culprit behind his spouse's murder is maddening given his inability to piece together the clues. He's befuddled, never quite sure where he is or what his short-term goals are, and Pierce captures his torment wonderfully. Nolan was working with a lower budget than his later projects employed, but he's incredibly economic, making the best of limited space. The striking black and white flashbacks add some variety to Nolan's visual palette, too. Nolan earned his first Academy Award nomination for Best Original Screenplay for Memento, and the shocking twist ending provides a rewarding conclusion to a complex story. While some of Nolan's films take multiple re-watches to comprehend, Memento invites repeated viewings more than it demands them. Number 4. Dunkirk. In Dunkirk, Nolan radically reimagined the World War II epic by portraying a historical event like a real-time suspense story. A week-long escape from the French beaches, a day-long mission to rescue the survivors of a naval conflict, and an hour-long aerial dogfight are presented simultaneously, depicting the entirety of the conflict as a heightened survival thriller. Each one of the 3 storylines is gripping, full of deeply human moments with and heroic characters. A young, naive soldier, Fionn Whitehead, a humble working-class man, Mark Rylance, doing his patriotic duty, and a weary, tired soldier, Tom Hardy. Each offer a different perspective on the theater of war, and despite the cross-cutting, the viewer doesn't lose track of any one story. Dunkirk doesn't have much dialogue, but Nolan's thoughts on war come through in the film's final moments, as the soldiers note that survival in and of itself is a victory. Unlike many war films, Dunkirk doesn't rely on a key inspirational moment or infallible savior character. Rather, it's a collection of heroic moments from an entire community. Dunkirk is a conscious reimagining of a familiar genre, and one of the greatest war films ever made. Number 3. Inception. Inception sees Nolan firing on all cylinders, crafting an original summer blockbuster not based on any existing material. The sprawling mythology behind the movie's dream heists is complex, but Nolan methodically introduces information and themes through exciting, accessible action capers. The set pieces, especially the now famous zero-gravity fight sequence, are among his best. With Inception, Nolan also proved that he could tell a dramatic story centered around family without descending into melodrama. Cobb, Leonardo DiCaprio, simply wants to reunite with his children and shield them from his horrible secrets. None of the visual spectacle would have any impact if Cobb didn't have a compelling motivation. DiCaprio does a terrific job stirring the viewer's empathy, and Nolan gives him a stacked and memorable ensemble to play off of, particularly Tom Hardy as the time-cracking forger, Eames. Further, the epic runtime doesn't drain your attention because of how tight Nolan keeps the pacing. Inception is one of the quickest 150-minute movies you'll ever see, and the stirring final moments are among Nolan's most hauntingly beautiful, in part due to the memorable score by his frequent collaborator Hans Zimmer. A bold, breathtaking epic, Inception is among the most original films of the 21st century. Number 2. The Dark Knight. Nolan's second entry in his Batman trilogy set a new standard for superhero movies, summer blockbusters, and modern cinema. A study in dramatic escalation channeled through of costumed characters, The Dark Knight is a rich crime thriller that questions the lengths that good people will go to in order to achieve justice. Replacing campy fantasy with the thrilling intimacy of filmmakers like Michael Mann, The Dark Knight made superhero movies dark and gritty before that became a cliché. Nolan has created many iconic worlds, but The Dark Knight takes the best of classic Batman storylines like The Killing Joke and The Long Halloween, and funnels them through social commentary intended for a modern audience. A challenging consideration of morality that's also a riveting action spectacle, The Dark Knight is a modern classic, and will undoubtedly be the film Nolan is most remembered for throughout his career. Number 1. Interstellar. Christopher Nolan's Interstellar is a sci-fi masterpiece with stunning visuals, mind-bending theories, and fantastic music. Interstellar cements itself as one of the greatest sci-fi films of all time. Interstellar is Christopher Nolan's, my favorite film director, science fiction epic, which navigates critical themes such as love, the survival of humanity, the pursuit of knowledge, and time travel, all encompassing the story of a man who must decide between his family and saving humanity. Former astronaut and aerospace engineer, Cooper, portrayed by the always amazing Matthew McConaughey, and his family live in a future where Earth is dying and farming is the most important occupation. Cooper wrestles internally against the circumstances that he and the world are implanted in. He believes the answer to humanity's dilemma lies within the boundless frontier of space, and not in attending to the planet ravaged by humanity's swift and cataclysmic technological ambitions. Fortunately, Cooper and his daughter are drawn into a secret NASA mission to save humankind by way of a cryptic wormhole that has appeared in the solar system and offers space travel to other possibly habitable planets. But who set these events in motion? What has been escorting Cooper and his crew towards humanity's saving? The reveal that future humans have evolved into greater dimensional beings that can travel back in time and set clues for Cooper to uncover is both inspiring and mind-bending. It is a difficult concept to understand. Interstellar comes from an individual, Christopher Nolan, that has frequently produced shocking plot twists in the dimension of time travel such as in the film Memento. In terms of Interstellar, Christopher Nolan argues for sentimentality throughout the film in the disputes between the scientific and the emotional. This is best highlighted in the logic and love monologue delivered by Brand, played by Anne Hathaway, halfway through the film. Brand argues that love and emotion should not be viewed as having less value than logic and science. But, we know that the mission that Cooper's team embarks on is given much more substance by knowing that Cooper does not simply want to just save humanity but also return to his daughter. Love is his driving force, which is very powerful concept. This is all for today. I'll get back to you again with another interesting video. Don't forget to subscribe the channel.